Hello students. So I welcome you to this learning session about operational amplifier. Before starting with this learning session, I would like to give you a small suggestion as you all are preparing for your upcoming semester exams. Yes, during this preparations of this exams, emphasizing for the marks is very important, but at the same time, giving priority for concept is very important because as you go to higher semesters and when you need to face the technical round during your interviews, if you're strong enough in core concepts, it will be very easy for you to clear such exams. So as you prepare for the exams, I prefer you all to give priority for even concepts also, understand the concepts, at the same time prepare in terms of examination point of view also. So let's begin with the session, operational amplifier. Now to understand about this operational amplifier, let's understand what this operational amplifier is made up of. Whether it is a component or whether it is a package, let's understand. I think you're all very familiar with this basic building blocks, that is resistors, capacitors and diode. Amplifiers are basically made up of this building blocks. So op amp is not a component or operational amplifier is not a component. It comes in terms of a package which is made up of basic building blocks like resistors, capacitors and diode. So now let's understand what is this amplifier. Amplifier is actually a circuit which is made up of transistors, resistors, capacitors and diode, which will actually increase the strength of electrical signal. In general, most of the electric signals are very weak in nature. So usually the strength of such electrical signal has to be increased before it is processed. And if you can see here, amplifier basically increases the strength of the input signal. Therefore, output signal we can understand in this way. It is nothing but the stronger version of input. That is, output signal strength only will be increased without any distortion, without any change in the shape. So this is what amplifier does. If I can give you a small example, a mic and speaker. Mic, I think it converts the sound signal into electrical signal, whereas the speaker converts electrical signal into sound signal. So basically amplifier is going to increase the strength of input signal which is given to speaker, and that is how the signal what we hear from the speaker is amplified, whose strength is increased. This is one of the application where we can see how amplifier amplifies the output signal. And so we can understand up to here, amplifier is the circuit which is made up of basic building blocks like resistors, capacitors and diodes. I would like to tell you one practical example to understand why amplifier is so important in analog circuits. So this is how we need to understand the core concepts before we get into derivations and lot of circuits. Let's take an example where we have three different containers. In the three different containers is filled with water and it is having the thermometer to measure its temperature. Let us assume the temperature of this container with the water is 28 degrees Celsius, 17 degrees Celsius and 20 degrees Celsius. And each container is having a sensor which is going to measure the voltage which is proportional to its temperature. So the sensor can just record the temperature in terms of voltage as 2.8 volts, 1.7 volts and 2 volts, which is proportional to its temperature. Now the task is to measure the average temperature of this three container. So how can we do this with amplifier? By performing basic mathematical operation by adding all the three values of voltage and dividing by 3. Let's take op amp. Assume this op amp as a circuit which is made up of basic building block. For this circuit, if we give the three inputs in terms of voltage, that is 2.8 voltage, 1.7 voltage and 2.0 voltage, what happens? This op amp is going to perform the math with respect to the voltage and gives the average value of this three different voltage. So just like this op amp not only doing amplification, along with the amplification, it can does various mathematical operations with respect to voltages like to divide, to find the sum, to find the multiplication, or else to multiply the different values of voltage and to find the derivative and to find the integral. So op amp is very much capable of performing the math with respect to voltage. So if we can understand the core concepts which involves various mathematical operation can be performed using this op amp. I think now we can understand why this is so important, because not only just amplifying, not only it is going to just increase the strength of the signal, along with increasing the strength of signal, it is going to perform various math operations with respect to voltage, and that is why operational amplifiers are very important. Now how it is going to be available for us. So this op amp is usually available in the form of where the tiny components are available on one single package, what we call it as IC741. Usually it comes in terms of integrated circuits. So now we will understand this op amp, its characteristics and how it is going to work. Probably in the next upcoming classes, we will understand the different configurations and in terms of various applications. Usually, op amp is represented as a triangle with respect to symbolically. It has got two different inputs, minus, plus, whereas the input with respect to minus, we call it as inverting input, and with respect to plus, we call it as non-inverting input. It has got two dual power supply, which is actually we call it as plus V minus V, and the voltage is measured with respect to difference in between input voltages. Now let's understand, and this plus V and minus V is nothing but op amp is actually powered with two dual power supply which can swing the output above the zero and below the zero. So this is how the output of op amp swings between above zero and below zero. Now to understand this op amp, we need to understand the golden rule of op amp to understand its functionality. So the very first characteristic is it has got infinite input impedance. I think this is what you might have learned in the notes or the characteristics of ideal op amp. What do you mean by that? Simple. No input is driven across this input. So according to this, no current is driven into these two input terminals. So that says that it has got infinite input impedance. Whereas the output is capable enough to source the current or sink the current. That is the reason it has got zero output impedance. So the two things what we need to understand about op amp is it has got infinite input impedance and zero output impedance. The most important characteristic of op amp is gain. Okay, actually the gain is nothing but the measure of output. The output actually it is proportional to difference between these two input. It is going to indicate how much the output voltage will be increased with respect to difference between inputs. So the gain is measured as ratio of output to input. If I can consider the output voltage as V3, therefore input is nothing but difference between two input voltage, that is V2 minus V1. Therefore gain is the ratio of output voltage to input voltage, where gain always indicate how much output voltage is increased with respect to difference between input voltage. So just to consolidate the concepts, op-amp, let's understand op-amp is not a component. Op-amp comes in the form of circuit which is made up of basic building blocks like resistors, capacitors, transistors. The basic operation of op-amp is to increase the strength of the signal. We need to increase the strength of signal before we process it. And I gave you a very good example of speaker, how it works with the help of amplifier and how that signal is going to increase its strength. Then we understood it's not only about amplification. Along with the amplification, op-amp is also able to perform various mathematical operations with respect to voltage. Then op-amp, which is very important, especially to build this analog circuit, is available in the form of integrated circuits, that is IC 741. And basically the output voltage, whatever it is, proportional with respect to input difference or the difference between input voltage. So op-amp is powered with two dual power supply, because of which the output can swing above the zero and below the zero. And very important characteristics of op-amp is infinite input impedance and zero output impedance, and the measure of the gain is very important to indicate how much that output can be increased with respect to difference in input voltage. Okay students, let's meet in next class where we will be understanding the different configuration of op-amp, that is open loop configuration and closed loop configuration, and how do we differentiate, in which scenarios we need to go for which type of configuration, and let's understand the block diagram of op-amp, how it works. Thank you.